Hey, everybody. Welcome to First Floor Conversations. My name is Jeremy Francesi. Thanks for stopping by. We're on episode 71. Excited to say we're joined by Chris Miller. Chris is the president of Elevate Sales Advisors, working with commercial organizations to help them develop a sales process that's sustainable and effective. And you guys know the deal, right? First Floor Conversations, the view at the top is only as good as the foundation which preserves it. And today we're talking through sales, which is the oxygen of business. And I think that's the punchline, right? So Chris, thank you for joining and taking some time. How's today been treating you so far?
Oh, you know what? It's another busy day, but hey, the good part about what I do is each day is a little different. So that keeps it exciting.
Good, man. Well, hey, let's set the table for everybody. If you're tuning in video, thanks for stopping by, and audio. I hope you're enjoying the new intro. I said it on the last episode. It's been a fun development. 20 episodes or so. The first few was me just doing my thing. Then we upgraded the setup, started to really create something pretty special. And then thanks to Steph, shout out Steph. I know you're editing this. We finally recomposed something, and the audio experience is a little bit more special. And so you guys, I hope you enjoy it. But let's set the table, right? So look, Chris, you have a very impressive background. I mean, you've been in enterprise sales and in large organizations in leadership roles where you're not only involved in deciding how you go to market, but navigating the nuance of what is ultimately a relatively complicated sales process, right? Most of the times, most of your roles, whether it's been in consulting, at Sodexo, Arano, right, oil and gas, these are industries that for the most part have relatively, sophisticated buying profiles. And I think it's a really good opportunity where when we think about the framework of building things that are sustainable and really, if you're watching the video, hence the commission on the back, right? Like the balcony view can be great, but if you don't have a sustainable way to bring in business, manage clients, then, that monthly best month yet, the best year yet, doesn't mean anything, right? Anything can look good in a short window of time. And so, Chris, why don't you do this for us? Let's get up to speed, like kind of looking through a little of your background. You have a couple pretty impressive items, but why don't you kind of get us up to speed on like when you got into sales and when it kind of turned from being a job to a career, and kind of how it's developed from there. And then we'll dive in. And so for those listening, like we're talking sales, business development, networking, building real viable relationships that don't just love grabbing a cocktail together, but it turns into growth and business, which is ultimately what's necessary to thrive. And so Chris, why don't you get us up to speed a bit on the journey and kind of how you got where you are in this business?
Yeah, what's interesting is that we always talk about sales, and I can say that everybody's a salesperson. And so whether or not it's your career or not is something totally different. Your first sales opportunity is the first time you sit in front of someone that you don't know and you're trying to convince them to get something. It could be, you could be haggling on a car, or you could be in your job interview, right? So that's kind of a sales opportunity. But for me, you mentioned being in like large enterprises, and it's before I stepped and created Elevate Sales Advisors, that's the world I lived in. It started from when I was in the Air Force and an officer, and I was buying products from large businesses. Then I transitioned to General Dynamics. And being with General Dynamics, everyone knows them as, one of the largest defense contractors in the world. But that's where I really started my sales profession. I started off in project and product management, but when I became a program manager for my own business line there, that's where I had that kind of 60-40 split, where 60% was all about running that business, that product line. The 40%, which turns out to be one of the most important pieces, is generating new business. And so that's where I became aware of more of the sales process, but also more in love with it because I enjoyed the people interaction, going out, developing the relationships. And so from there, I went over to Ariva, which is now Arano, due to some changes in the industry. And for about 10 plus years, I actually worked with that company inside their federal business, where we were selling products and services directly to the federal government in support of the mission of the Department of Energy. And at that point, I left there and went over to its nuclear transportation and waste business, in which I ran that business unit for the sales and marketing of that business unit for the entire United States. Which the funny part that came out of it is, we always sign up for one thing and you get something different. So of course, signed up to run sales and marketing for the US. Decision was made internationally that, hey, you know what? Anybody who wants to buy a product, foreign country or not, if it's a US based product, that's going to come under the US. So quickly, my job went from having domestic responsibility, having international responsibility, which, creates a whole different piece on sales. Now you're going over cultural divides where things you might do as norms in the US, you don't do as norms if you're in China or if you're in Japan or you're in somewhere in South America. So that always shifts your mindset, but it also makes you a little bit better. And then I left there to go to Sodexo, which I think a lot of people know about, Sodexo, working in their corporate services. And then now all of a sudden I go from large utilities to working with different corporations to sell their facility management services directly into major corporations, which the piece about that I love is that, hey, that all is still relationship based. That's how I sell, is all based on relationship based. And then so of course doing COVID, get near the end of it, I guess maybe we'll say near the end of it, I was presented with the opportunity to step away and to form our own business. And that's something I wanted to do for a long time. COVID really got me used to not being on an airplane Sunday afternoon, not getting home again until Friday afternoon or sometimes on Saturday. And it also gave me an opportunity to work with small and mid-sized businesses. Everyone says small and mid-sized businesses are the lifeblood of the country, and it is. And so for me to be able to provide outsourced sales leadership services to organizations who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford someone like me that has 20 plus years of experience in sales, it's something I enjoy doing every day.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, there's a lot that we can unpack here. And so what I want to be able to do, and to kind of give a framework for those listening, is like, everybody wants more leads, right? There's these tools and softwares, and there's a million ways that everybody's selling about, like, we can help you get more leads. The truth is, it starts with understanding how you want to position yourself. It starts with understanding what your actual value is. And the thing I think was interesting on your end is, the business lines that you were managing, whether it was a single line of services or products, or it was an international, a global distribution network, for the most part, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, these were high ticket items. Like, you're not selling for the most part. And I think it's an important distinction, right? Because when you want to sell $100,000, $500,000, multi-million-dollar contract, your buyer profiles change.
That's right.
Now, that's not to say that CEO, CFO, or buying agent, or whoever you're working with that is on their day job buying $1 million solution isn't also buying the $12 sunglasses off a Facebook ad. Like, people are people everywhere they go. But the reason I want to shine a light on that is because when you have a product or a business and you're going to market and you're asking people to spend six figures and up with you, there's really not much you're going to do to force the sale. They're going to choose to buy from you. You're not going to sell them from a standpoint of like, they're going to, I hope they don't find out, right? Like,
right.
These are what I call mutual evaluations. That is in my opinion, where B2B business and high ticket sales, if you want to cost, 50 grand, 25 grand and up to millions, there's an exchange of value that is a mutual decision. It's, I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to learn about you, and you're going to tell me about you, and you're going to acquire information from me. And together, we're going to see if we can solve a problem or fit or accomplish something that otherwise we may not be able to do elsewhere if we don't do it together, right? And so the reason I want to just take that moment to pinpoint that is that same for marketing when it comes to sales. And that's where, when we talk through some of what we're going to get into, it's like, Chris is speaking from a position of certainty where it's like, look, we're not talking about like I've sold a couple $1 million worth of $12.99 products off Facebook. This is, you build a couple $1 million business selling real high ticket items, whether it's through the federal sector or commercial sector. These are different buying processes, and sustainability matters. Nothing's worse than spending 2 years working a deal and losing it, right?
Exactly.
Especially when the pipeline isn't ready to replace it. Because, and one thing you said on one of our first calls was, talking about like how healthy is your actual pipeline, right? Which we'll talk about that at another point, right? Where sales folks are a little optimistic. They got $2 million in the pipeline. They're like, I'll close at least half of it. It's like, well, will you? And so let's start here, right? Let's start like on the front end from a strategy standpoint. Frame up the conversation for us, Chris, on when you work with companies and you draw from the experience you've had. There's obviously strategy and how to go to market. There's the channels that you go to market, from a cold call BDR route to content marketing to drive traffic to webinars. Frame up for us, like what do you do when you get involved with groups and, drawing on your experience, like where's home for you when it comes to like that process? Is it everything? Is it like you focus on helping companies cold call to set meetings? Where do you fit into the equation when you're working with groups?
Yeah. So if we talk purely on the sales strategy, that's one of the areas where, do I work on them cold calling? No. But what I do want to understand is, how do you get your clients? How do you go about it? Or are you doing cold calling? Are you using digital marketing? Or for some reason you still in print? Or are you sending, teenagers around knocking door to door, just getting sales? And there's not necessarily something to say any one of those is wrong. It's an understanding of how does your model work, because industry to industry is going to be slightly different. But it's three things, regardless to which of those you do, when you're talking about your pure strategy, that you always have to be locked down on. You have to know where you are in the industry, how are you positioned, what's your value prop, why me? It's always, even when I was selling multi-million-dollar systems, it was always the question of, why us? Why are you going to buy from me, as opposed from someone else? And the other piece is understanding who your competition is. And the funny part, and you may think, Chris, what you're telling me is just totally crazy, but a large portion of small and mid-sized businesses, when we survey them, struggle with knowing who their competition is. And so if
why
you
do you
don't,
think it is though? Like, why? Like, well, not to interrupt, but why is that, right? Like, business. We were talking about this before we jumped live. Like, business is sport. If I've torn my ACL 3 times playing basketball. I love basketball, right? But there's an element of like, when I grew up and when I coached little kids, like, look, if you're coaching, 12-year-olds, I get it. You don't need to know a lot about the plays they're running, but like, you want to know, are they running a zone? Are they running man-to-man? Are they full court? Are they going to meet you at half? You want to understand the game you're playing. And I find it similarly when we talk to clients, sometimes they don't even think about competitive analysis of let's listen before we speak in marketing.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Do you think they don't know how to approach it? Or is it because if I'm good enough, it won't matter?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? So, the business owners that I work with are smart people who really understand their product or service. They understand it in many cases a whole lot better than I do. But they spend a whole lot of time really focused on getting that product developed, getting that service put together. And now you've invested so much money and energy in just getting your it or your what, that you kind of have immediately jumped over the process of who else is providing it, who else is out there doing what, and how do I stack up against them? And now all of a sudden you're in that phase where you have to go to market, you have to sell, and then now you're caught in that loop. You're actually caught in that loop, and so that's why I believe that happens. And because they aren't necessarily equipped with understanding and developing a sales strategy up front, no one's kind of ringing that bell to say, oh, hey, wait a minute. before you go and engage with the very first client, here's some things you need to make certain you understand.
Right. Makes sense. Right. So let's divide this into two things. I actually think, like, as I'm processing like where this conversation can go, I think there's really like there's a couple audiences. There's obviously functional owners that would benefit from understanding how to maybe approach going to market or approach going to new markets, and building a sustainable process for getting out of obscurity, allowing yourself to target audiences, communities, decision makers, get meetings, and work them through a process, because getting the meeting is part of the battle.
That's
But if
part
you,
of it.
like we were talking about again offline, like, you have companies that success could kill them. Literally, if they had 10 demos a week for their solution, it would put them in the ground because they have no infrastructure to support opportunity increase, And so, but where I want to go is like, there's functional owners that I think are going to benefit from this conversation, but there's also the corporate sales managers that are maybe Chris 5, 7, 10 years ago that are stepping into Sodexo and they're saying like, I got to grow the New England division of this thing. Right. They got promoted and like, man, what am I working with? Right. And I kind of think that they're actually very similar, right? If you treat it like you're a business owner and I'm going to run New England's division of, this company, then you should treat it like a business. What's your go to market? Where are you getting leads? Where are you spending? What's your infrastructure look like? And to get where I want us to go ultimately in this conversation, when you stepped into those leadership roles, Chris, in those larger organizations, what were some of the early days? What were the first things you really did to figure out what do we have in place? What don't we have in place? And what needs to be done in the first 30, 60, 90 days to get it to a point where you, as the owner of that line of business, service, or otherwise, we're able to start to find progress and growth? What do those first few months look like when you're getting your feet set beneath you?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold, right? And it's something that is a statement. And with my affiliate organization, Sales Acceleration, it's what we say. It's people in the process equals profit. And so you have to understand both of them. And so stepping into a new organization, it's almost as if you're really like a small business owner. You're starting from scratch. You need to really understand your value prop. You need to understand who are your competitors. Where are you currently positioned in the industry? Because that creates a foundation of how you grow. Without understanding those pieces, you can't go and say, now I want to expand by 20% if you don't know a baseline of exactly where you are. And in understanding your competitors, you also need to now understand your client and who your potential clients are and what is it that they really want. You always hear everyone hears that salesperson and they say, oh, that person could sell ice to an Eskimo. And I always say, if you hear that, run, because that's not true. You can't sell an Eskimo ice because he doesn't need it. And so that's all part of kind of what you talked about earlier. And you made a statement, and I was kind of shaking my head when you talked about it's not necessarily just the product or the service, it's a solution. And so no matter what you're selling, we're all solution solvers. We're providing solutions. In the end, regardless of the industry, you're creating solutions. And if you can't create a solution, then you can't grow. And so, and the other piece to that, which is the people, is in order to grow, and you mentioned that whole, if you had 10, meetings in a week, you collapse. Well, you have to have the team and the right people in place. So inside that first 30, 60, 90 days, you have to evaluate the people you have. What is their workload? Yeah, I might have a team of 10, but if that team of 10 is fully taxed out and loaded, then I can't expect to go and capture new markets because those 10 people can't handle it. And so those are all, and it's not anything in series. Those are decisions that you're coming up with in parallel. And it's always tough stepping into an existing business, because you're stepping into existing business. The world can't stop while you spend 30, 60, 90 days trying to figure this all out. So, I mean, you're sort of, in some cases, you're changing the oil, you're rotating tires you're NASCAR, right? You better be able to pull into the pit stop and do it in 10 seconds, not an hour.
Absolutely. So I want to talk briefly on competitive analysis. If we can get into details on like, I think some people don't know how to start, right? We do what we call project game film with clients, where it's again like B, you'll probably hear this. It's like we look at it like sports, like again back to basketball, any sport, right? Like I want to know what the pitcher's throwing. It's not going to necessarily change how our pitcher throws, but it will help us be smarter when we go on offense. And on that end, I think some people are like, well, where do I go? Do I just go to Google and just look up other companies selling this stuff, right? How would you recommend? Because I do agree a huge part of, look, sales is effort, no doubt about it. You got to grind. I had a sales call today that came in and he hit me 15 times. I ended the call by literally saying, hey man, I'm not an active buyer, but I value the information because I will be at some point. If you want to take time to do a demo, let's have a day, right? But I appreciate the hustle because I understand. I've seen every message you sent. I'm not blind. I got 2 eyes. I got contacts, but I ain't blind, right? And there's an element of the understanding, like you can call people 25, 35 times, but at the end of the day, you need enough leads in that pipeline to support that follow-up, right? You can't just call the same 10 people 500 times. At some point, you need new opportunities. And competitive analysis, I do think, can provide a tremendous value because maybe you target your competitors. Maybe you find the thing that makes you super unique and you find the option that you go target their competitor. Hey, you find a way to get the data, right? And say, hey, we know you're working with this organization. And I'm not saying that's the only way out, but information is a very valuable resource in sales. How do you go about, performing competitive analysis when, let's say you are a business owner and maybe you have 10 employees and you're trying to grow and you're a service-based business? How do you go from maybe spending 2 years in the basement, so focused on the way you deliver value that you really don't really know what's happening in the market around you, and you realize you have to start that process? What do you do?
Yeah, it's twofold. The first one is probably the simple one that you mentioned up front. You do the research. You go out and you pull up Google and you search as much as you can on what different companies are in your market space, in your geographic area, if you're clearly focused on just a geography. That's the simple thing to do, right? The other piece you do is you do it along with your selling. So when you go and talk to a client, every time you go and talk to a client, you aren't trying to sell them, because in the end, people hate being sold. But what you can do is talk to them, understand how their business works. Who's currently doing that for you? How do you feel about what they're providing? If you could change something, what is it that you would change? If I was going to start a new contract with you tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd want me to do? And so those are all relatively subtle ways of finding out from that potential client, what do they like and what do they don't like? And so, and that's starting to help you gauge your competitor, but it's also starting to help you gauge and set up how you need to position yourself in the marketplace.
I'll even add, you're spot on. I'll add one thing to that, look, you're not going to win every deal. It's just not possible. Unless you are not talking to enough people, then cheers. You're batting 100% because you went 2 for 2. But look, when you lose business, ask why.
Yes.
Like I'm confident enough in my business to explain on the mic and say, look, we lost the deal recently. It's cool. Things happen. I reached out and said, hey, to the director of marketing. I said, hey, do you mind sharing, if you're open to it, do you mind sharing a little bit of what route you went on? They said, we're going in a different direction. I said, do you mind telling me the direction you went on? Did you go to another firm? Did you stay with somebody you were already working with? I would love to understand what the decision was, right? Especially if they send you something that is kind and saying, look, we'd love to keep you in mind. This one just wasn't a good fit. But I got an email back that was so valuable. And it was really clear of, this is some things we weighed when we made the decision. This is what influenced us when we said, we're going to make this choice. And kind of here's where it left us off. Right. And it's not about now I'm going to restructure the way I go to market, but it's about now I understand why somebody that's in a functional ownership role, deciding on these things on a day-to-day basis, decided to go a different direction, and that's data. And so I'll be honest, part of it's humility. You got to be able to ask people questions where you can get real feedback and say, hey, you didn't choose me, you didn't take me to the prom, who'd you go with, right? Was it a blonde? Just kidding. Right. So, but it comes down to, like, you can hit Google and go down the rabbit hole. That's just doing the work. Right. The other thing is exactly that. Talk to your customers. Right. If they're coming to you, are they going from nothing to something, or are they already with a vendor and they're not happy? If you get the same thing 19 times, 20 times, they're like, yeah, we were with them and it didn't work. And then think about that, and then maybe build the intelligence internally with your BDR team, your sales force, and say, these are common reasons clients of this vendor face difficulties or challenges. Then your call is something along the lines of, hey, Mr. Mrs. Business Owner, Mr. Miss CFO, we found a common organizations that work with this vendor experience one of these two challenges. Which is the most frustrating for you? Right. And you use the data to build the call, build the strategy. And so I think part of it is exactly what Chris is saying. Like, go do the research, use customers as an opportunity to learn, not just bulldoze them with a pitch. And look, if you missed the deal, go talk to them and ask why. It's okay. Right. And to be honest, if they can give you the feedback, in my mind, and this is my opinion only, I think it says great things for what's possible from a standpoint of, if they didn't give a shit, they wouldn't give you the feedback. So if in our world, a collaborative environment, I don't want to be a vendor. I want to be a partner. We got to be able to tell people when we don't like things. That for me was like, good. I do have confidence in our ability to come together, maybe 2 years from now, but we can take feedback and you can share with us what's actually on your mind.
And what you're saying, Jared, is a great point. I mean, it's what is tabled as being in consultative sales. You know, you want to be a trusted partner, advisor to your clients or your potential clients, and you won't win them all.
No, it's not possible, right? And it's okay. It just comes down to, and that's where you got to figure out. But that's where I think being an advisor and thinking of yourself as a subject matter expert, you got to eat, right? Oxygen. Sales is oxygen. You can't win without the business unless you're just running on funding and you're just trying to stay alive until you go public. That's a different conversation. So we get competitive analysis. We have an idea how to position ourselves. We have an idea of what makes us unique, and we have an idea of where we want to go. Once we get to that point, right? When you work with organizations, are you spending time helping them craft the how to get the lead part, or are you getting them at a point where you have leads? How do you build a sales journey that goes from discovery, analysis, due diligence? Like, are you on the side of creating the lead, or on the infrastructure of, now we have the leads and the attention of a buyer potentially, we have to create a really nice sales journey so that it's conducive to their buying? Like, where do you get involved? Maybe it's all of it. I'd love some insight there.
I'm much more and almost purely on the side of taking the leads, running them through a sales process to be able to, in the end, come away with a signed contract.
Got it. So once they get the leads, you come in. So that's where, like, again, that's why partly how we met was, like, where we come into play is not in the sales journey development, but in the marketing communication side that gets them visible, valuable, and in front of people. And then, so now they get the leads, right? What I'd love to understand is, what are companies right now, what do you find they're struggling with, even if they're getting decent leads? Like, they have no process at all? Like, what do you find common in industries? And feel free, Chris, to segment it. I recognize you work with anybody from retail to high tech, like, obviously a different process through and through. But I'd love to understand, as somebody that does talk to functional owners on a consistent basis and talks about how they're nurturing and managing leads, like, what's happening in the space right now? What's going on?
Yeah. So what's interesting of what you just now said is that there's a sales agility assessment that any advisor like myself that works with sales acceleration, we have access to. And what that assessment does is it pulls data from CEOs, business owners, sales leaders, and it compiles them. And right now there's, roughly 2,400, 2,500 data points, over the last couple of years that are in there. And so out of last year, so this is part of what's in our 2021 numbers. You say, okay, what are the top 5 areas where companies need help, right? And it's funny, this came up, but the number one item was competitive analysis. 98% of all of the surveys and assessments that were done, the companies all need help to some degree or another. The fact that they haven't done a competitive analysis and they don't understand their own strengths and limitations. Another one that's there, that's underneath that same vein, and this one also was what we talked about a little bit better, is like value prop. 78% don't understand and have a unique value proposition in place. Once again, you would think that's would be the case, but and so then you talked about, now you've come in, right? You've come in, you've created leads, you're dumping leads like crazy into the sales funnel. Well, 76% of those businesses don't prioritize their prospects into A, B, and C level accounts. They treat them all the same. And now all of a sudden you might start to see where that problem comes in. Is every account and lead doesn't have the same probability of closing it. So now all of a sudden you've done a great job. You are generating leads, but the sales team is not effectively working those leads. And so they're spending 5 hours on something that has less than a 10% chance of ever closing. And they're spending 1 or 2 hours on those opportunities that if they really put into work, they could probably turn that into an actual contract. And so one of the things that I will focus with the business owners is making certain that you understand, have the right criteria of how you properly prioritize those accounts. And a lot of it comes from what you just now mentioned when you said lessons learned and why did you lose? Because that starts to help you understand why did you lose. And I won't say this as a fact, but I'm pretty certain that you'll develop a trend and you'll sit there and see that of the last 10 accounts I lost, they all have very similar characteristics. Well, guess what? Stop going after those types of accounts because it's starting to show you that those probably aren't very good leads for you. And that's something eventually I could feed back in to you. I could sit there and say, okay, Jeremy, you need to adjust your funnel so that we aren't getting these types of leads into it because we're not successful with them. And that's how our relationship goes back and forth.
And you hit something head on, right? Like, so just to read this back, right? Competitive analysis and value proposition are some of the top challenges with functional owners and CEOs, executive leadership, people running businesses, right? Which is interesting because you think about that. Like, do you think Tim Cook doesn't know every single person selling a smartphone? Do you know what I mean? There's some logical things that come into play where it's like, it's a question of maybe, what I'm curious on is how many people don't know and they don't want to know. They do want to know, but they don't want to know. And I know you know what I mean by that. It's like they want to know because they know it'll help them, but they don't want to know because there's nothing worse than finding out that what you think is special about you is a commodity. Right? You want to create some anxiety, that's anxiety, right? But there's an element of necessity there to understand, like, when you sell somebody what you think is the steak and they look at it as just some sizzle, you're going to miss, right? And so, and then the last part is really sales and marketing, how they work together, right? When you learn about the leads that are converting, obviously you have to have development, business development reps and sales folks that are good, and they're not just missing the leads, right? The old Glenn Gary, right? Like the leads are crap, right? Like the leads are crap, right? It's like, well, sometimes they're bad leads, right? And you have to be able to tell marketing what is creating bad leads, right? Maybe there are too many users and you need decision makers, right? You can't sell somebody a $10 million contract if they're a low-level employee in most companies. So if your marketing is speaking to the user level, then you need to have a development process that gives case studies and resources that enables that sales journey to climb the chain of command, because otherwise it won't work. Or you need to change the strategy entirely to build content that resonates with the owner of the business, the functional manager that isn't worried about maybe the technical nuance of why email and softwares are broken. And they're thinking about, I need to stabilize labor costs, and the lack of productivity is causing the problem, right? Your messaging dictates who you're talking to. So let's talk through value proposition. One thing we actually do a little bit of, depending on the need, is what we call a positioning statement, right? And it's really just making it like in one sentence, explain to me who you're talking to, what it is that you're bringing to them that matters. So it could be as simple as, for founders and small to mid-sized company executives that have a proven track record and have not yet developed infrastructure for marketing and communications, strategic branding studios can perform. Unlike our peers, here's how we help. And it's just a one sentence bite of like, this is what we do. When it comes to value proposition, where's the breakdown? Do you find that they spend so much time looking at the feature or the function and the thing that they think is interesting, valuable, or cool, that they don't think about like they're buying it to solve a problem, or like look, most things are lowering costs or increasing effectiveness, right? I mean, most companies don't spend $10 million because they're looking to just increase their expenditures, right? What is it about defining a value proposition that you think this collective group of CEOs and business owners is having trouble with?
I think they just don't know how, right? I mean, you made it, right? And no one thinks their baby's ugly, right? Everyone thinks, I just spent the last 3, 4, 5 years of my life working on this. It's great, and everybody's going to want it. And here's why everybody's going to want it. And it's very internal. And as a result, if you don't bring a third party in, someone from the outside to kind of walk you through it, right? You have to be able to say, you're the company, you help your client get X results by here's the solution. And as a result, it avoids this, right? Okay. And if you can't say how your product helps your client get X results, then let's start over.
You hit one thing head on, right? That I want to pinpoint. Gets this result. People don't hire us because they want pictures. They will hire us because they want the result of having made great pictures. They don't hire us because they want to run ads. They hire us because they want the result of a great ad being run. Right? People buy the outcome. You're just in the way. Right? It's like, and so it's incredibly important to understand that. It's incredibly important, right? And obviously, look, if you're in a business that a restaurant's a great example, like people want the experience. Most businesses that we're talking about here don't sell an experience. They sell a service or a product where I need a lawyer, I need an accountant, I need an audit, I need this product, I need this software, this SaaS product, this improvement in something. You're trying to solve a problem. And maybe that's lowering costs, maybe that's creating efficiencies, right? But they're looking for a result. And to your point, Chris, if you can't explain how problem A plus solution A equals a improvement and a measurable improvement, it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be really, really challenging. And so when you work with companies, Chris, how do you help them go from maybe not having a very clear value prop, a very clear idea of their story, which is kind of a simplified version of a value prop, right? It's not the dress and the makeup, but it's the punchline of this is what we do to bring value to our community. How do you help them go from not having clarity to having something that's refined and actionable, ultimately that can drive a great value prop is the North Star of a sales department, right? Yeah. It's like, this is what we do every day. How do you help them really go from nothing to something?
Well, one of the things that I offer as a service is a value prop workshop. And it's 2 days, but it's a half a day each day in which business owner, other key decision makers, those involved in the process get together. And it's not me creating your value prop. It's me facilitating working with you to come up with ideas as far as who are you, why did you start the business, what was the problem that you intended to solve from the very beginning? Are we solving that problem? How are we going about doing it? And then it's just the dialogue, and it allows them to slowly build up over the course of those 2 days of why. Wow, this is why we actually exist. This is why we matter to someone else. Because the other piece of it is what I said at the end, is this is why we matter to someone else. Because it doesn't, I always used to tell my sales team, it doesn't matter what we think. What matters is what our clients, what our potential customers think.
100%. It's funny you say that. I'm like clapping in my head. It's so common. I'll talk to clients and explain, like, the best sellers, the best books written were determined by the reader, not the writer. Right? Like the writer can write and be like, this is the best book, but if nobody reads it, nobody cares. Right? And so it's always about outside looking in if you want to be great in the business, right? And in that landscape. So let's do this. We got about 10, 15 minutes left before we wrap up. We've talked through a little bit of competitive analysis. We've gained a little insight into what functional owners are struggling with, competitive analysis, value proposition. Let's talk a little bit more about like developing a sales process, right? Let's say that we got the leads. Let's say we have a healthy pipeline. Let's talk through and think like, you know what, we have this opportunity to work these opportunities and convert them to business, but maybe we're only converting 10 or 20%, right? When you work with organizations that are converting less, right? And they're like, we're getting leads, but something's not working out. What happens when you look under the hood? Like, what are some of those common indicators? Like, what if you were to call it the check engine light of the sales process? Like,
Right.
what are those lights that are going off? Like, ding, ding, don't have great follow-up material. Like, hey, this demo is just, you're vomiting features on them. You're not helping understand what it means to them. Like, walk me through some of the common problems you're finding when it comes to like conversion and creating a sales process that really is designed for the buyer, not the sales rep trying to hit their quota.
Right. Yeah. And you hit really two different pieces there that are really important. But the first one starts off with what I mentioned a few moments ago, which is understanding what a good lead really is. Okay. And being able to quickly understand that. And that doesn't happen immediately. I can't walk into a client on Monday and by Friday tell them, okay, here you know what a good lead looks like, because it takes time to follow through that process so that you have enough data points so that you can start doing it. It's just like pure statistics. You know, you give me 3 data points, you probably don't have a really good idea of what a good lead looks like. All of a sudden you give me 20, you give me 40, you give me 50, I start having a much better indication. But that all takes time. So that's one of the first big pieces. The other big piece is your sales team, and that's why you said, you know, how are you motivating, incentivizing them? Is the way that you're incentivizing your sales team in alignment with what you want as business results? Because if it's out of alignment and they're just about doing whatever they have to do to meet their quota, but them meeting their quota doesn't necessarily give you the results that you want, then you have happy salespeople, but then you have a very unhappy ownership.
And a miserable customer.
And you got miserable customers.
Right now, your customer support team's getting their kicked in. You know, it's
and so eventually that piece it'll crumble on top of itself.
Great point.
Because you'll then start making shifts, then you'll lose salespeople, you'll lose customers, and those are all kind of those characteristics that you see in businesses that are in need of someone coming in to provide a solid sales infrastructure for them. It's everything from the beginning part of the process. It's, do you have the right metrics and KPIs in place? Those have to be in place. Do you have a CRM? Are you using your CRM if you do have one? And all of those pieces have to tie directly into each other. And I look at every last one of those elements. Not necessarily all of them require change, but they all have to be looked at. Because if they aren't in concert with each other, then you don't have a sound process.
Right. It's hard to sustain it. Right. I mean,
Well,
look,
you can't sustain it. Yes.
there's countless books written about the roller coaster of sales, right? You're fat, happy, and then you're like, shoot, I got to refill the pipeline, and that ebb and flow. Look, to kind of close things out here, right? Like, I think what it comes down to is you develop a sales process where you're clear about how you're valuable, and you understand that. And this is a little bit of my perspective on business and marketing, and I do think that marketing needs to hug sales more. You know, we've talked about this. I don't have it on the desk right now, but we talked about this on the last call. The book Quantum Marketing was put out by CMO of Visa, and you know, there's a stat early on there. I'm going to rough the number, but it's like something like 73% of CEOs currently don't have the confidence that their marketing department can generate business growth, generate an outcome. And I think in many cases, it's because they're not talking to sales. They don't understand what the buyer wants, thinks, values, needs, is looking for. They don't understand the perspective on the product because they're just trying to write emails and send out social media content and run ads. And they're not understanding about, like, where's their buyer in the process? What leads are they attracting? Because bad leads that buy most of the time turn into problem clients.
Yes.
Right. And it's not the client's fault that you sold them something that doesn't help them. That's your fault, right? On the other side, you're going to have pretty unhappy customer service departments because they're solving problems that they don't know how to solve because the product didn't give the buyer what they wanted. And so it creates a challenge, and to kind of tie up some loose ends, like it's not an easy thing to build a sustainable infrastructure for sales. It's a complicated process. And the buyers are going to acquire information. Most people buy anything like they buy a car. I don't know anybody that goes and walks on a lot without an idea of what they want. No, I can't think of a single person I know or strangers that I would walk up on the street of DC and say, hey, when you bought your last car, did you walk onto the lot blind? Like, they went on Google, they did their research, they found information, and they realized what influenced their decision, narrowed it in on price, payment, rates, features, model. And then they went to the lot and they said, this is what I want. It's one of these two options. I want to drive it. Can you get the payment down? Now, when you're selling multi-million-dollar deals, it's going to be a bit more complicated than that, but the mindset of that buyer is the same. They're going to go acquire information. They're going to go look at what is going to influence their decision. So if your sales process isn't educating them, providing value, again, you said something perfectly that we didn't really isolate, which was you're a solutions provider. You're a solutions officer. Your job is to find a way to solve somebody's problem. If you're not thinking about the information, the obvious objections, the obvious questions, the obvious concerns of your buyer, your sales process is going to lack opportunity. It's going to lack the ability to create value, right? You want customers that refer you, like give them a tremendous sales process, solve their problem. And the thing I've tried to, explain to my team a lot, and not necessarily everybody, but business is just the measure of keeping promises and not keeping promises. That's it.
Yeah.
And if you can sustainably keep promises that are promises that ultimately are of value to people listening to you, then you have a chance to survive. But at the end of the day, it's, a stock price is the perception of if you can keep your promise or not, right? It's that simple. And if your sales force is aligned incorrectly to things that, they need to sell X number of deals every quarter to hit their bucket. Well, what do you think they're going to go hunt if they need high volume to hit their bonus? They're going to go find a low-hanging opportunity that could be good, but now they're spending 85% of their time chasing C leads instead of A leads, which could be a multi-million-dollar contract, but that one deal could take 60% of their time, right? It's understanding what is the actual structure of the department. And I think that's ultimately, Chris, where you bring a tremendous amount of value. Before we kind of close things out, I mean, look, where can people find you? What's top of mind for you? Feel free to kind of enjoy, promote, and, kind of talk about what's going on in your world, so to speak.
Well, hey, of course, I'm here in the DC area, and you can always email me. You can. I actually coming up in September. I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but
If you're listening, it's probably the first or second week of September. We're doing a couple things on the rebrand front, on some other things. I expect this to probably launch 9/1, and this being a couple episodes in the bay, it'll be September probably.
Maybe September. Well, it'll miss my. It'll miss my. This will probably miss the timing for my September seminar. But I have one for September 14th. I plan to also do a follow-up one in December. Those are live free seminars that are there for business owners to come in and really get insights similar to this. The September seminar is just me speaking. I know people don't want to just hear me. So, it may actually work out, Jeremy. I may say, hey, Jeremy, you know what? I think we tag team pretty well together. Hey, let's come in there and let's do a seminar in December. And, it's my opportunity to reach out to business owners, give them insights. I tell people I can't be all things to all people, but if you come into one of my seminars, hey, I want you to get one thing. Everybody, I want you to walk out with one thing that you think was valuable to you. And then now we've all won.
Absolutely. Check it out. I'd love to. I think we can crush something. I think it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, look, when it comes down to, and look, we're on episode 71 of the podcast, and we're going to keep rolling strong. I mean, for me, this is some of the most fun I have every week. And I love the business I run, but there's some opportunities that just you get to sit and talk to people that really understand what they're doing, and they understand a part of maybe a business or an environment or part of the way we interact as a community or an economy, depending on what perspective you're looking at it as, where you can take a little bit to build something a little bit better. And in this environment, if you're listening and you're a functional owner, a business owner, even a head of business development in a corporation, or you're a small business owner and you're not a salesperson and you know that, and you're like, I need more customers, but this just isn't what I do. This is something where Chris can help. And look, it's okay to not know how to do things. What's not okay is dealing with the consequence of not handling it, right? Like, go tackle it, right? If you get, there's tremendous opportunity if you can really build a sales infrastructure that's conducive to the buyer's journey and what you actually can bring to the table. And so with that in mind.
And Jeremy, I just want to throw in, it's always free for any of those people to contact me for a consultation, and I'm one of those people who, if I listen to you and if I don't think I can help you, I'm going to say, right, I can't help you. And I might actually, and I've said this before, I'm like, you don't have a sales problem, you got a marketing problem. And here's who you need to go talk to.
Totally. It's radical candor, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to talk to people, and so Chris, thank you so much for joining. Chris Miller, Elevate Sales Advisors. Check it out. Go explore. I hope you found this valuable. You guys know the deal. My name is Jeremy Francesi. This is First Floor Conversations, and the view at the top is only as good as the foundation which preserves it. We'll be back soon for more. Thank you for stopping by.
Hey everybody, my name is Jeremy Francesi. I'm the founder and president of Strategic Branding Studios, and I want to say thanks so much for stopping by and tuning into the video. If you enjoyed the content, remember to like, comment, and subscribe so you can stay tuned and stay informed on all new releases. If you're interested in learning about how SBS can help you and your organization take marketing and communications to the next level, visit us at strategicbrandingstudios.com for more.